My name is Isla Grant. I'm 29 years old, a senior interior designer for Haven and Heart Design Company in Savannah, Georgia. In less than 24 hours I was supposed to walk down the aisle at the Palmetto House, a historic mansion overlooking the river, the kind of place that graces glossy wedding magazines with its oak-lined drive and sprawling verandas. For the past 14 months I had lived and breathed this wedding. Every spare moment outside of work had been spent planning, coordinating, dreaming. I had a binder so thick it could double as a doorstop. Pages of swatches, vendor contracts, handwritten notes from late-night brainstorm sessions. I'd sacrificed weekends with friends, taken on extra freelance projects to cover costs, and poured nearly every dollar of my savings into making sure the day was perfect. Perfect for Graham and me. Graham Westcott wasn't just a man I loved, he was the man I believed I was building a future with. Charming in that old-money Southern way, his family had deep roots in the city, the kind of roots that come with portraits in historical societies and names etched on plaques downtown. We'd met at a charity auction 2 years ago, and from that first conversation I'd been drawn to him. He was polished, attentive, and, in my mind, completely different from the men I'd dated before. The rehearsal dinner had wrapped up only a few hours earlier. It had been held at his parents' estate, a sprawling white-columned home on the outskirts of town. Margaret, his mother, had been the perfect hostess, all gracious smiles and warm toasts. She'd hugged me tightly at the end of the night, whispering, "Tomorrow you'll officially be one of us." I remember feeling so safe in that moment. When I got home, my best friend Callie crashed in the guest room after helping me triple-check the seating chart. My gown, a hand-embroidered silk masterpiece I'd splurged on with my own money, hung on the closet door waiting. I was exhausted but buzzing with anticipation. And then, at exactly 11:58 p.m., my phone lit up on the nightstand. Half asleep, I reached for it, expecting a last-minute text from the florist or the venue coordinator. Instead, my eyes locked on the subject line glowing in the dark. From Hollingsworth and Tate LP, urgent, premarital agreement. I frowned, my mind already struggling to catch up. A premarital agreement? At midnight? The ceremony was tomorrow. I opened the email. There were only 2 sentences in the body. "Miss Grant, please review and sign the attached agreement before tomorrow's ceremony. Without your signature, the wedding cannot proceed. Regards, Leonard K. Tate Iskew." Beneath it, a PDF attachment. I hesitated before tapping it, an inexplicable chill prickling down my arms. The silence in the room felt heavier somehow, like the air itself was holding its breath. And then I opened the file. The first page looked official enough, the kind of neat, densely packed text you'd expect from a law firm. At the top, in bold, was a title that made my stomach twist. Prenuptial Agreement, Graham Westcott and Isla Grant. I began reading. By the second paragraph, my pulse was thudding in my ears. It wasn't just a prenup. It was a blueprint for erasing me. The language was cold, surgical, almost smug. It stated that all property, income, and assets acquired after the marriage would be the sole property of Graham Westcott. Every cent I earned from my work, my designs, my freelance projects, even the intellectual property of my own concepts, would be considered family assets controlled by him. And family assets, in this context, meant his family. In return, I'd have no claim to any of his earnings, investments, or property. If we divorced, I'd leave with nothing but personal effects, clothing, jewelry, and any small personal possessions I could carry out of the home in one trip. One trip. The contract even dictated that I would waive any rights to spousal support, regardless of circumstances. And just in case I ever thought to challenge it, there was an ironclad arbitration clause, naming as arbitrator a firm owned by his uncle. I felt my face grow hot, the kind of heat that isn't embarrassment but something darker. The heat of being cornered. But it was the header in the upper right corner that turned my stomach into stone. Prepared at the request of Mrs. Margaret Westcott. Margaret, Graham's mother. The same woman who, not 4 hours earlier, had raised her champagne glass to me in front of 20 guests and called me the daughter she'd always wanted. The memory of her perfume, expensive gardenia and something sharper underneath, drifted into my mind, and suddenly that hug at the rehearsal dinner felt less like a welcome and more like a performance. I read through the pages again, slower this time, as if maybe I'd misunderstood. But the meaning didn't change. The agreement wasn't a safeguard. It was a muzzle, a leash, and a locked gate all in one. Every clause stripped away something of mine. My independence, my work, my right to any part of the life we would build. And they wanted me to sign it less than 12 hours before saying I do. My phone was still warm in my hand when I hit Graham's name in my contacts. He didn't answer the first time. Or the second. The third time he picked up, his voice quiet and tense. Isla, it's late. I swallowed hard. Why did I just get an email from a law firm telling me to sign a prenup? At midnight. The night before our wedding. Pause. Then, Mom told me she sent that over. The words landed like a slap. She. My voice cracked. It's from her? Not you. She asked the family attorney to draft it. It's just. Just what, Graham? My voice was shaking now. Just a harmless little formality. As I've read it. And there's nothing harmless about it. On the other end, I heard him exhale sharply. Everyone in my family signs one. It's for the protection of the Westcott legacy. There was. Not protection for us. Protection for them. I stared at the contract still glowing on my screen, and the words seemed to blur for a moment as something icy began to settle deep in my chest. I tightened my grip on the phone, forcing my voice to stay steady. So let me get this straight. The night before our wedding, Graham, your mother decides I need to sign away any right to anything we build together? And you're okay with that? There was a pause, the faint sound of him shifting, maybe pacing. Isla, it's not like that. It's just a safeguard. It's standard in my family. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. Standard? This isn't a just in case. This is a, you will never have anything that's yours again. Says I get nothing. Not even what I earn myself. How is that a safeguard? He sighed, that low, condescending tone I'd heard a few times before when he thought I was overreacting. You're blowing this out of proportion. Mom is just cautious. She wants to make sure the Westcott name is protected. Something cold slid down my spine. Protected from what? From me. From the woman you supposedly love. You're twisting it, he said quickly. This isn't personal. I stared at the words on the screen, feeling the weight of every clause pressing against my chest. Not personal. Graham, this document is personal. It's about our lives, our marriage, our future. And it's being shoved under my nose at midnight like some last-minute errand. Look. He hesitated, and in that hesitation I could hear it. The calculation, the careful choosing of words. If you really can't sign it, maybe we shouldn't get married. The room seemed to tilt. My heart, still pounding, slowed in that way it does when the shock starts giving way to something sharper. You're saying, if I don't agree to this, the wedding's off? Just. Mom won't feel comfortable. And if she's not comfortable? I cut him off. If she's not comfortable? Graham, this isn't her wedding. He didn't answer. The silence stretched between us, and I realized that maybe in his mind it was her wedding. Her guest list, her venue suggestions, her approval stamped on every decision. And now apparently her contract. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. I think we should sleep on it. We'll talk in the morning. I almost laughed again, but it came out more like a breathless exhale. In the morning? The morning of our wedding? You think I'm going to wake up and suddenly decide I'm fine with being erased? He muttered something I couldn't catch then. Good night, Isla. The call ended. For a long moment I just sat there in the dark, my phone still in my hand, the contract still open on the screen. Somewhere down the hall, I could hear Callie breathing softly in her sleep. Outside, the wind pushed against the old window panes, a slow, restless sound. And in the middle of it all, a thought began to form, quiet but solid. Maybe there wasn't going to be a wedding. I sat on the edge of my bed, the glow from my phone screen still washing over my hands. The contract was there, line after line, each word sharper than the last. Somewhere in the background, the silk of my wedding gown rustled faintly in the draft from the open window, a whisper from the life I thought I was stepping into. But now that life looked different. Smaller. Controlled. For the past year I had poured myself into this wedding. I'd worked late nights, skipped vacations, turned down dinners with friends. I'd coordinated every vendor, chosen every flower, and paid for every little extra Margaret suggested, even when I knew it was pushing my budget to the edge. Not once had I thought to protect myself, because I believed, foolishly, that marriage was about trust. That Graham and I were a team. But as I stared at that prenup, it hit me. This wasn't about trust. This was a business deal. A merger. and I was being positioned as the party with nothing to gain and everything to lose. I thought back to Margaret's toast at the rehearsal dinner, how her smile had been perfect, polished, but her eyes had flicked over me like I was something to be assessed. How she'd emphasized the word legacy when talking about the Westcott family history. The Westcott legacy. The same legacy that now required stripping me of anything that could give me independence. My chest felt tight, but underneath the ache was something else. Something steadier. If they wanted to make this a transaction, fine. I'd make one of my own. I closed the document and set my phone on the nightstand, my decision already forming. I wasn't going to sign. And if that meant no wedding, then there would be no wedding. Somewhere deep down I expected to feel devastated. But I didn't. What I felt was clarity. A still, dangerous clarity that comes when you finally see the truth, and stop pretending it's something else. Tomorrow, everyone would be expecting a ceremony. A celebration. A carefully curated image of love and family unity. Instead, they might be getting something else entirely. Sunlight poured through the sheer curtains, too bright, too warm, too cheerful for what the day had become. For a few seconds after waking, I forgot. My mind was still in that dreamlike haze where the only thing on today's agenda was marrying Graham Westcott in front of 200 guests at the Palmetto House. The gown was still there, hanging like a promise. My bridal shoes, pale blush satin with crystal straps, waited by the door. Then I remembered the email. The contract. The phone call. The taste in my mouth turned metallic. My phone was buzzing on the nightstand, the vibration rattling against the wood. The screen lit up with a name I'd seen hundreds of times in the past year. Carla Bennett, venue coordinator. I let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, a text from Carla popped up. Morning, Isla. Just checking in. The floral delivery is here, the musicians are warming up in the garden, and the catering trucks are unloading. Everything's on schedule. On schedule. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the hardwood floor cool under my feet. The air smelled faintly of gardenias, Margaret's favorite flower, no doubt filling every arrangement downstairs. From the guest room I could hear Callie stirring. She called out softly, "Want me to start the coffee?" I didn't answer right away. I was staring at the gown, at the veil draped over the back of the chair, at the stack of vow cards I'd written and rewritten until the ink smudged. All of it had been built for a day that no longer existed. My phone buzzed again, this time from the bakery. "We're en route with the cake. See you soon." Another from the photographer. "We're at the venue setting up for getting ready shots. Can't wait to see you." And another from Carla. "Isla. Just confirming, ceremony starts at 4 p.m. sharp. Do you need us to move the arbor if it's too sunny?" Each message was a thread tying me back to the plan everyone thought was still in motion. I reached for my phone, scrolled past the texts, and found Carla's number in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button. If I pressed it, I could end this. Right now. Before I even stepped foot at the venue. I thought about Margaret's smile. Graham's pause on the phone. The cold legalese of that contract. And then I pressed call. Carla picked up immediately, her voice bright. "Isla. Everything's looking beautiful here. I need to cancel the wedding," I said. There was a beat of silence so sharp I could almost hear her blink. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me. Cancel the wedding. Effective immediately." On the other end of the line, Carla's voice shifted from confusion to concern. "Isla, I don't understand. The ceremony starts in 6 hours. Guests are already arriving in town. The flowers, the musicians, the catering." "I know," I said evenly. "But it's not happening. Please secure the venue and inform everyone the event has been cancelled by the sponsor." "By the sponsor?" she repeated slowly. "Yes. That's me." I could almost hear her recalculating the situation. The sponsor, the person whose name was on every contract, whose credit card had cleared every payment, had just pulled the plug. Carla's tone softened into the kind of careful diplomacy reserved for brides on the edge. "Isla, is there an emergency? Something we can fix? I can give you an extra hour, move things indoors, whatever you need." "This isn't about the weather," I said. "And nothing needs to be fixed. It's over." The silence stretched for a few seconds before she murmured, "Understood," and hung up. I didn't pause. Next was the catering company. "Miss Grant." James, the catering manager, sounded cheerful at first. We've got the tasting menu prepped, champagne chilling and the cake. Cancel the service. I cut in. Pack up. You're done for the day. There was a sharp inhale. You can't just, the guest count is 190. Everything's plated, the hors d'oeuvres are being. I can, I said calmly. Check the contract. I'm the responsible party. He started to protest but I ended the call. The florist was next. Elena Rodriguez, who'd been up since 4 a.m. arranging Margaret's imported gardenias and cream roses into towering displays. Her voice broke when I told her. But the arch, the centerpieces, I've been working on them for days. They're perfect, Isla. They'll be perfect for someone else's event, I said softly, and ended the call before guilt could take root. Then came the string quartet, the photographer, the decorator. Each conversation chipped away at the picture-perfect facade Margaret had been crafting for the past year. By the time I hung up on the last vendor, my phone was buzzing with incoming calls. Some from numbers I recognized, others I didn't. I ignored them all. In the space of 45 minutes, I had unraveled 14 months of planning. The Palmetto house would still stand, the gardenias would still bloom, the catering would still smell like rosemary and butter. But there would be no vows, no aisle, no marriage. I glanced at the clock. It was just after 11 in the morning. By 4 o'clock, 200 guests would be milling around in confusion, dressed for a wedding that had evaporated before lunch. For the first time since opening that email, I felt something close to control. By early afternoon, my phone was a war zone. Margaret's name flashed across the screen over and over, her calls stacked between Graham's, the venues, and a growing list of relatives I hadn't heard from in years. The notifications were relentless, vibrating so hard against the nightstand it threatened to tip over. I didn't pick up a single one. Instead, I sat at the kitchen counter with a mug of coffee, watching the muted sunlight move across the floor. Callie stood at the stove making scrambled eggs like it was any other Saturday morning. "You really did it," she said quietly without turning around. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't hear her, but because I didn't have to confirm something we both knew was already irreversible. At 3:15, the first photo came in from a bridesmaid. The Palmetto house's front lawn, rows of white chairs under the oak trees, completely empty except for a pair of confused musicians packing up their instruments. The caption read, "Where is everyone?" 10 minutes later, another, this one from one of Graham's cousins, showed a crowd of formally dressed guests standing by the gates, a few with champagne glasses still in hand from the pre-ceremony reception. And then came the one that made me pause. Margaret herself, caught mid-sentence in a candid shot someone had texted me. Her mouth was open, her brows drawn tight, one manicured hand raised in that familiar imperious gesture I'd seen her use on waitstaff, hotel clerks, even Graham. Whatever she was saying, it wasn't part of the carefully rehearsed welcome speech she'd probably imagined delivering. My phone began to ring again, Graham this time. I stared at his name, remembering his voice from the night before. "If you can't sign it, maybe we shouldn't get married." The phone buzzed in my hand until the call timed out. Seconds later, it lit up again. This time I let it ring just long enough for him to think I might answer. And then I declined. By 4 o'clock, the texts had turned frantic. "Where are you? This is a disaster. We can still fix this. Talk to me." I closed them all without replying. Instead, I slipped my phone into my bag, grabbed my keys, and walked out into the warm Savannah afternoon. The air was heavy with the scent of wisteria, the streets buzzing faintly with weekend traffic. I wasn't going to the Palmetto house. I wasn't going to explain myself or defend my choice, or listen to a single excuse. If they wanted a performance, they'd get one, just not the one they'd been planning. By the time Graham finally saw me again, if he ever did, the version of me he knew would be long gone. By the time I reached my apartment, the sun was already starting to dip, streaking the Savannah sky in gold and rose. My phone was still vibrating in my bag, the endless cycle of calls and texts almost comical now. I didn't take it out. Instead, I pulled my carry-on from the closet and tossed it onto the bed. No gown, no veil, no vows. Just jeans, soft sweaters, the travel-sized toiletries I always kept ready for weekend trips. My passport was in the top drawer, right where I'd left it the last time I'd dreamed of going somewhere far away, someday. Someday was now. I opened my laptop, searching flights with the kind of detachment you get when you've crossed the point of no return. Boston, Jacksonville, even Atlanta if I had to drive. And then I saw it. A late-night flight out of Savannah to Denver with a connection to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I'd been there once years ago on a project for a boutique hotel. The mountains had felt like another world. Clean air, space to breathe, no one who cared who my fiancé's family was. I booked the ticket without hesitation, using the same credit card that had paid for every last gardenia at the Palmetto house. While the reservation confirmed, I took a slow walk through my apartment. Every corner still held traces of the past year. Ribbon swatches on the coffee table, favor samples in a box by the door, seating charts propped against the wall. I didn't pack any of it. It could all stay here like the remnants of a play I'd quit before the final act. At 8:45 I called a car to the airport. When the driver pulled up, I left my phone on the kitchen counter, screen still lit with unanswered messages. I didn't trust myself not to look, not to let one perfectly worded plea drag me back. The airport was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own thoughts. Mine were clearer than they'd been in months. I wasn't running away, I was walking towards something that didn't require permission slips from Margaret or ultimatums from Graham. When my plane lifted off, the city lights fell away beneath me, and with them went the weight I'd been carrying since the day Graham slid that ring on my finger. By the time we landed in Jackson Hole the next morning, the air was sharp and cold, the mountains capped in white against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. I stepped outside, filled my lungs, and for the first time in over a year, there was no ticking clock, no looming deadline, no wedding. Just me. And that was enough. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a small coffee shop in downtown Jackson, the kind where the baristas know your order by heart and the walls smell faintly of cedar. Snow had started to fall outside, soft and slow, blurring the outline of the mountains. I was halfway through a sketch for a client when I heard the two women at the table behind me whispering. "Did you hear about the Westcott wedding?" one said. The name caught my attention before I could stop myself. The other woman lowered her voice, but not enough to keep it from carrying. "Oh, everybody's heard. Called off the day of. Guests showed up to an empty venue. They're saying the bride found out about some prenup at the last minute and walked." I sipped my coffee, hiding a smile. The first woman shook her head. "And Margaret's been scrambling ever since. Her charity board is in chaos, and the Palmetto house canceled her next event. Apparently they don't like being the centerpiece of a society scandal." The other laughed. "Well, that's what happens when you push too far. Poor Graham, though. Poor Graham." The first woman raised an eyebrow. "From what I hear, he's been telling people he was the one who ended it. But no one's buying it. Not after that article in the Chronicle." I didn't ask what article, I already knew. A week after I left, a friend had emailed me a link. The wedding that wasn't. How a last-minute contract ended Savannah's most anticipated ceremony. The piece quoted anonymous sources about the prenup, the midnight email, and how the entire day had unraveled before it began. Margaret had probably been furious. Graham had probably tried to charm his way out of it. And their carefully maintained image, the one they valued more than anything, had been cracked wide open. I turned back to my sketch, the smile still tugging at my lips. Revenge hadn't been about humiliating them in front of 200 people. It wasn't even about the gossip that followed. It was about stepping out of a life that had been tightening around me like a noose, and realizing I never had to step back in. The snow outside was falling harder now, blanketing the street in white. Somewhere back in Savannah they were still explaining, still spinning, still trying to rewrite the ending. But I already had mine.